The shower incident. The engine room was quiet, save for the low hum of machinery and the occasional flicker of control panels. Jack, the only human engineer aboard the alien starship Phyrexis, wiped sweat from his forehead. He had been working nonstop for hours, repairing the ship's navigation system. Almost done, Jack muttered to himself, tightening the last bolt. The alien technology was impressive, but complex. He had been assigned to the Phyrexis under a new intergalactic exchange program. Humans working alongside alien crews to strengthen alliances. It was exciting, but exhausting. Satisfied with his work, Jack decided to call it a night. He grabbed his toolkit and walked down the long silver corridor to his quarters. The soft glow of the ship's lights illuminated his path. A few alien crew members passed by, nodding politely. Jack smiled back, feeling proud of his small but important role on the ship. As soon as he entered his room, Jack dropped his tools on the desk and stretched. His muscles ached, and the thought of a hot shower was too tempting to resist. He peeled off his uniform, leaving it in a crumpled pile, and stepped into the shower. The alien showers were different from Earth's. No water, just a gentle mist that cleaned and refreshed the skin. It felt strange at first, but Jack had grown to like it. "Man, this feels good," he sighed, letting the mist wash over him. After a few minutes, the mist stopped, signaling the end of the cycle. Jack grabbed a towel from the rack and wrapped it around his waist. As he stepped out, he caught his reflection in the shiny metallic walls. He ran a hand through his damp hair and smirked. "Still got it," he joked to himself. Jack barely had time to relax before something unexpected happened. Hiss. The door to his quarters slid open, and standing there were two alien crew members, Zori and Karo, twin engineers from the planet Varanae. Their tall, slender figures and glowing blue eyes locked onto Jack. For a moment, no one moved. Jack froze, gripping the towel tighter. Hey, guys. Can I help you?" Zori and Karo didn't respond. Their eyes widened, and they exchanged quick glances. Jack shifted uncomfortably. "Listen, I think you..." Before he could finish, the towel slipped from his hand. Time seemed to slow as it floated down to the floor. The twins gasped. Jack's face turned bright red as he scrambled to grab the towel. "Whoa. Okay. Hang on." He wrapped it around himself as fast as he could, heart racing. But the twins, they didn't move. They simply stared at the towel on the floor, as if Jack had just dropped a priceless artifact. "What's wrong with you two?" Jack asked, breathless. Zori finally spoke, his voice soft and almost reverent. It fell." Jack blinked. "Yeah, towels do that." Karo shook his head. "No. On Varanae, a cloth that touches the body, and then the ground is sacred." Jack stared at them, unsure if they were joking. "Sacred." Zori nodded solemnly. "It carries the essence of the wearer. It must not be discarded lightly." Jack looked down at the towel in his hands. "It's just a towel, guys. I use it to dry off. Nothing special." But the twins didn't seem to agree. Karo bent down, carefully picking up the towel as if handling fragile glass. He held it up to Jack with both hands. "You must take it," Karo said, bowing slightly. "It is now part of you." Jack wasn't sure whether to laugh or feel embarrassed. "Look, I appreciate the gesture, but really, it's not a big deal. I'll just wash it." Zori's eyes narrowed. "Wash away its essence." Jack groaned internally. "Oh great, I've accidentally created a religious relic." "Okay," Jack said, taking the towel back. "No washing." "Got it." The twins relaxed slightly but continued to stare at him in awe. Is there anything else?" Jack asked, hoping to end the awkwardness. Zori hesitated. "We only came to check the ventilation systems, but this was enlightening." Jack forced a smile. "Glad I could provide enlightenment." As the twins turned to leave, they paused at the doorway. Zori glanced back. "You are Braver than we thought, Jack. Jack furrowed his brow. Because I dropped a towel. Caro nodded. It is a rare thing to let the universe witness such vulnerability. You are strong. Jack watched them disappear down the corridor, leaving him standing half-dressed, holding his towel like it was some legendary artifact. He sighed and shook his head, muttering to himself. First human on an alien ship, and I'm famous for dropping a towel. Great. But deep down, he couldn't help but laugh. Maybe this wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Confusion and awkward apologies. Jack spent the rest of the evening replaying the bizarre encounter in his head. Lying in his bunk, he stared at the ceiling of his small metallic room. The faint hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the walls. Every now and then, he'd glance over at the towel folded neatly on the chair next to him, as if it might start glowing or float away on its own. Sacred towel, Jack mumbled, rubbing his eyes. I'm never gonna live this down. By morning, he convinced himself that the twins were just messing with him. Some kind of alien joke he didn't fully understand yet. After all, humans had pranks. Maybe dropping towels was just their version of pulling someone's leg. But things didn't get any less weird the next day. As Jack walked through the corridors, he began to notice something strange. Alien crew members were looking at him differently. Normally, he could walk by without much more than a polite nod. Now heads turned. Whispers followed him. One alien engineer, a bulky reptilian from Torvax 9, actually stepped aside to let Jack pass, something that never happened. Jack paused and glanced around, feeling like a zoo animal on display. Morning, he said cautiously. The Torvax grunted and nodded deeply, almost like a bow. Jack's eyebrows shot up. Okay then. When Jack reached the cafeteria, the situation escalated. As he slid his tray down the line, Zori and Caro appeared at the far end. The moment they spotted him, the twins exchanged frantic whispers and immediately straightened their postures. Jack sighed and walked over. All right, you two. I need answers. The twins both smiled, too wide, too forced. Jack, Zori greeted, nodding respectfully. Caro held out his hand in the traditional alien gesture of peace. Jack shook it, feeling like he was meeting royalty. Cut the act, Jack said, sitting down. I know something's going on. People are acting strange. He leaned forward. And I'm guessing it's because of this. Jack tugged lightly on the towel hanging from his belt loop. Caro's eyes widened immediately. Zori let out a quiet gasp. You still carry it, Caro whispered. Of course I do, Jack replied, frowning. I mean, it's my towel. Zori's gaze lowered. He respects the relic even after all this time, he murmured to his brother. Jack slapped his forehead. Guys, seriously, it's just a towel. I didn't summon ancient spirits or reveal the mysteries of the universe. It fell. That's it. Caro hesitated. It may seem simple to you, Jack, but to us, cloth that touches both skin and ground without shame is a powerful symbol. Jack crossed his arms. Symbol of what? Zori leaned in, lowering his voice. Strength. Vulnerability. Fearlessness. Jack blinked. Fearlessness. I dropped it by accident. Caro tilted his head. Perhaps, or perhaps the universe guided your hand. Jack groaned. Oh, come on. Now the universe is involved. The twins remained serious. It is rare, Zori continued, for someone to expose themselves to fate so openly. You let the fabric fall. You did not scramble to hide it at first. That is why the crew respects you now. Jack frowned. I did scramble to grab it. I practically dove across the room. Caro shook his head. No. It fell. And in that brief moment, you accepted it. Jack stared at them, utterly baffled. So, because I momentarily gave up on saving the towel, I'm now some kind of enlightened figure. Zori smiled. Yes, exactly. Jack let his head drop onto the table with a thud. Later that day, the whispers grew louder. As Jack worked on the engine coils in the maintenance bay, a group of alien workers gathered nearby. They didn't say anything directly to him, but he felt their eyes watching. Occasionally, someone would glance at the towel now tucked into his belt. Finally, Jack couldn't take it anymore. He turned to the crowd. "All right, listen up," he called out. "I know you're all curious, but it's just a towel. I swear, it's not magical. I'm not a hero. I'm not starting a towel cult." The aliens exchanged quiet murmurs. A small Vernite technician hesitantly raised a hand. "If it is not sacred, may I touch it?" Jack hesitated. He looked down at the towel, then back at the curious eyes staring at him. With a sigh, he pulled it from his belt and held it out. "Knock yourselves out." The technician carefully approached and brushed the fabric with his fingertips, bowing slightly. Others followed, each one treating the towel like a holy relic. Jack watched in stunned silence. I really am starting a towel cult. As the last alien stepped back, Kuro appeared behind them. "Perhaps not a cult," he said with a smile. "But you have started something." Jack exhaled sharply and slung the towel back over his shoulder. "Fine. If this towel is gonna be famous, I'm at least charging for autographs." Kuro chuckled. "A wise choice, Jack. A wise choice." The sacred towel. By the third day, Jack had given up trying to explain himself. The towel incident had spread like wildfire across the ship, morphing into something larger and stranger than Jack could have ever anticipated. What had begun as an embarrassing accident was now apparently a pivotal cultural event, at least to the alien crew. Walking down the corridor, Jack noticed how crew members stepped aside as he passed, some offering respectful nods, others glancing at the towel slung casually over his shoulder as if it were a crown. The soft murmurs followed him everywhere. He groaned under his breath. This is ridiculous. But nothing prepared him for what happened next. The grand exchange. It started during a routine maintenance shift. Jack was bent over an open panel in the engineering bay, tinkering with the ship's cooling system. The compartment was cramped, and the heat made his uniform stick to his skin. After a while, he reached for the towel hanging from his belt loop, wiping his face before tossing it onto a nearby crate. That's when the twins showed up again. Zeri and Karo entered silently, as they often did, their glowing eyes immediately locking onto the towel now resting on the crate. Jack, still focused on his repairs, didn't notice their arrival until Karo let out a small gasp. Jack glanced up. "Oh, it's you two again." Zeri stared at the towel, wide-eyed. "You discarded it." Jack furrowed his brow, following their gaze. "It's not discarded. It's right there." Karo approached slowly, hands clasped in front of him. The sacred cloth, left unattended. "This is unexpected." Jack sat up straight, wiping grease from his hands. "Okay, listen. It's not sacred. It's a regular, old, slightly damp towel. I sweat. I wipe. End of story." The twins exchanged a glance. "No," Karo said softly. "It carries the essence of you. To leave it behind." He hesitated. "It is a powerful act, one of trust and vulnerability." Jack blinked. "I left it on a crate." "Exactly," Zeri whispered in awe. Before Jack could argue further, Karo stepped forward, pulling something small and shimmering from his pocket, a crystalline pendant that radiated faint blue light. He held it out to Jack. Jack raised an eyebrow. What's this?" Karo lowered his head slightly, offering the pendant with both hands. "A trade. This crystal is from our homeworld, a piece of the luminary spire. In exchange, may I hold the towel?" Jack nearly dropped his wrench. "You're trading me a rare crystal for my sweat rag." Karo nodded solemnly. "It is an honor to possess such an item." Jack glanced between the pendant and the towel, unsure whether to laugh or call for a medical officer. "Guys," he started, running a hand through his hair. "You don't have to trade anything. I can literally get more towels from the storage unit." Zeri's eyes narrowed. but they would not carry your essence. Jack groaned. This was spiraling out of control. Reluctantly, he took the pendant, feeling the cool weight of it in his palm. It shimmered softly, clearly valuable. With a sigh, he handed the towel to Karo, who took it as if Jack had just entrusted him with the galaxy's most dangerous weapon. Karo held it to his chest reverently, while Zeri observed with a mixture of pride and respect. Jack watched in disbelief. You know what? Sure. Why not? Rumors and reverence. It didn't stop there. By the end of the day, half the crew had heard about the Great Towel Exchange, as they called it. Jack received offers of rare minerals, hand-forged trinkets, even technological blueprints, all in exchange for a towel imbued with the strength of a human. At first, Jack thought it was a joke, but when a towering Corvette engineer, a species known for their stoic demeanor, bowed deeply and presented him with an ornate staff in exchange for 1 square inch of the towel, Jack realized this wasn't ending anytime soon. He rejected the staff but relented when the engineer practically pleaded for a loose thread from the towel's corner. Jack sat on his bunk that night, staring at the pile of gifts he had unintentionally accumulated. A small part of him wondered if this was how cult leaders felt. He sighed, rubbing his temples. How did this even happen? A captain's concern. The next morning, Jack was summoned to the bridge by Captain Ralph, a seasoned alien commander with sharp horns curving backward from his head. Ralph eyed Jack carefully as he entered the room, arms crossed over his chest. Behind him, the stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport. Jack saluted lazily. You wanted to see me, Captain. Ralph gestured for Jack to sit. There are concerns. Jack raised an eyebrow. Concerns. The captain's serious expression cracked slightly. About your following. Jack groaned. It's not a following. I didn't ask for this. I just dropped a towel. Ralph chuckled softly. Sometimes the simplest actions leave the deepest impressions. But I must ask, what exactly are you planning to do about it? Jack shrugged. Honestly, I was thinking of opening a towel stand. Ralph stared at him blankly. Kidding, Jack added quickly. Look, I'll try to clear things up. But if people want to treat my laundry like holy artifacts, I'm not sure I can stop them. The captain nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps. That's not such a bad thing. Jack blinked. Come again. Ralph smiled faintly. Cultural exchanges happen in strange ways, Jack. Sometimes the smallest misunderstandings lead to the strongest bonds. Jack sighed. If you say so, Captain. But if I catch anyone framing this towel, I'm drawing the line. The towel's true meaning. Jack sat cross-legged in the engine bay, staring at the empty space where his towel had once been. It was gone. Not stolen, not misplaced. Given away. Karo had walked off with it the day before, cradling it like a newborn. In return, Jack now possessed a glowing crystal that could probably power a small city back on Earth. He had tried to explain that a simple towel wasn't worth something so valuable, but Karo had insisted. And Jack. Well, Jack wasn't exactly good at saying no when aliens treated him like some kind of mythic figure. But now, without his trusty towel, Jack felt strangely incomplete. He didn't realize how much he relied on the thing. It wasn't just for wiping sweat. It was a symbol of normalcy in a galaxy full of strange customs and even stranger beings. The towel was his one piece of home, a scrap of Earth among the stars. And now it was sitting in an alien's quarters, probably framed and hanging on the wall. Jack leaned back against the wall, exhaling loudly. I traded my dignity for a glowing rock, he muttered. Dignity is overrated, a voice chimed in. Jack glanced up to see Zeri approaching, his usual serene expression in place. He knelt down beside Jack, folding his long limbs like an origami figure. Here to make another offer? Jack asked, smirking. Zeri tilted his head. Not today. Karo is studying the towel. Jack blinked. Studying. He believes it holds a message, Zuri explained casually. Jack sat up straighter. Message? From who? Zuri met his gaze with complete sincerity. From you. Jack threw his hands up. Okay, I need to understand this. Explain to me, step by step, why my sweaty towel is suddenly the alien version of the Holy Grail. Zuri thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. In Varanai culture, he began, cloth is more than fabric. It carries the essence of those who wear it. When it touches skin, it absorbs energy, not just physical, but emotional. To us, a cloth worn during labor or hardship is sacred because it carries the spirit of endurance. Jack furrowed his brow. Okay, but it's a towel. I didn't exactly fight a space war with it. Zuri smiled faintly. You misunderstand. It is not about what you did, but how you reacted. When the towel fell, you showed no fear, no embarrassment. Jack opened his mouth to argue but stopped. Did I? Sure, he had scrambled to grab it, but in that brief moment, he hadn't panicked the way he thought he might have. Maybe because it felt like such a small thing at the time. Zuri continued. To us, you displayed great vulnerability and accepted it. That is rare. On Varanai, to show vulnerability without shame is the mark of a true leader. Jack ran a hand down his face. So let me get this straight. I accidentally dropped a towel, didn't make a scene, and now half the crew thinks I'm the next great leader of the Varexis. Zuri nodded calmly. Correct. Jack leaned back, laughing softly. Unbelievable. But deep down, something about it resonated. Maybe it was absurd, but it also made sense in its own strange way. Bridging cultures. Later that day, Jack found himself in the main common area. Alien crew members passed by, some offering subtle nods of respect, others giving curious glances. Jack spotted Kuro across the room, holding the towel with reverent care as he spoke to a group of wide-eyed crewmates. Jack groaned. Here we go again. He crossed the room, hands in his pockets, and stopped just behind Kuro. Giving a sermon, are we? Jack teased. Kuro turned, his expression lighting up. Jack, I was just explaining the significance of the towel to the others. Jack chuckled. Well, since my towel is apparently teaching everyone lessons, maybe I should start charging a rental fee. The crewmates looked at one another uncertainly, but Kuro smiled. Humor, another sign of strength. Jack sighed. I can't win with you guys. He held out his hand. All right, I think I've been towel-less long enough. Can I have it back now? Kuro hesitated but eventually placed the towel in Jack's hand with great care. Jack held it up dramatically, waving it lightly in the air. There, the sacred relic has been returned to its rightful owner. A ripple of soft laughter echoed through the room. Jack smiled. It felt good to break through the cultural barrier, even if it was with something as ridiculous as a towel. As the crew dispersed, Zuri approached once more, a thoughtful expression on his face. You understand now, don't you? Zuri asked quietly. Jack glanced down at the towel, running his fingers over the worn edges. Yeah, Jack admitted. I think I do. It wasn't just about the towel. It was about connection, about finding meaning in the little things. In a galaxy full of technology and alien worlds, sometimes the simplest objects hold the greatest value. Jack draped the towel back over his shoulder, feeling a strange sense of pride. Maybe this isn't such a bad legacy to have, he muttered to himself. Zuri smiled. Few can say their leadership began with a towel. Jack grinned. Well, I'm nothing if not unconventional. Station rumors spread. By the time Varexis docked at the Nexus 9 space station, Jack's towel had become legendary. It wasn't just the crew whispering anymore. Somehow, through a mix of loose tongues, exaggerated retellings, and probably a bit of interstellar gossip, word had spread beyond the ship. Jack suspected Kuro and Zuri were partly responsible, but neither would admit it. As Jack stepped off the ship's ramp, he immediately felt the weight of 100 curious eyes. The station's main docking bay was crowded with travelers, engineers, and merchants from countless worlds, but Jack could tell exactly who had heard the story. They didn't look at him directly. No, that would be too obvious. Instead, they pretended to focus on their work, all while sneaking subtle glances at the small, neatly folded towel tucked into Jack's belt. He sighed. Unbelievable. Zari, who was walking alongside him, smirked. Your legend grows, Jack. Jack shot him a look. It's not a legend. It's a towel. Correction, Zari replied smoothly. It's the towel. Jack rolled his eyes. As they walked further into the station, Jack couldn't ignore how the air around him felt heavier. Not dangerous, just different, like he was the center of some strange, intergalactic inside joke. They passed a group of Orvani traders standing near a fuel depot. One of them, a tall, amphibious alien with bright orange scales, nudged his companion and whispered something in a low voice. Jack distinctly caught the phrase, human relic bearer. Jack slowed his steps and turned to Zari. What exactly are they saying about me out here? Zari's eyes twinkled with amusement. I imagine the truth. Your truth or actual truth? Jack pressed. Zari shrugged innocently. Truth is subjective. Jack pinched the bridge of his nose. That's not reassuring. A dangerous trade offer. Jack's concerns only deepened as they entered the market sector of the station. The bustling area was filled with small vendor stalls and trade counters, each displaying goods from across the galaxy. Rare minerals, alien fabrics, exotic foods. The air smelled faintly of spice and oil, and holographic signs flickered above the booths. Jack and Zari stopped by a mechanical repair station to pick up spare parts for the Virexis. As Jack inspected a calibration tool, he felt a presence behind him. Turning around, he came face to face with a squat, bearded alien merchant from the Tarkan species. The merchant's sharp eyes immediately fixated on the towel hanging from Jack's belt. I'll give you 5 denarii gems for it, the merchant blurted. Jack blinked. Excuse me. The towel, the merchant repeated, eyes narrowing. I'll trade you 5 gems from Tarkan's southern mines. Rare, very rare. Jack stared at him, half expecting the merchant to break into laughter. But the man looked completely serious. Jack glanced at Zari, who was clearly trying, and failing, to suppress a grin. I'm sorry, but this isn't for sale, Jack replied carefully. The merchant frowned, leaning closer as if trying to negotiate. I'll throw in a thermal pulse rifle. Brand new. State of the art. Jack almost choked. Are you kidding me? You want to trade military-grade weapons for this? The merchant's eyes gleamed. It's not just a towel. It's a symbol. Word spreads fast, human. They say the cloth bears the strength of your people, power and vulnerability. The way of warriors. Jack groaned. I dropped it in my quarters after a shower. Exactly, the merchant said, as if that explained everything. Jack held up his hands. I appreciate the offer, but I'm keeping it. The merchant stared at Jack for a long moment before sighing and stepping back. You drag a hard bargain, he muttered before disappearing into the crowd. As soon as he was gone, Jack turned to Zari. This is getting out of hand. Zari finally let out the laugh he'd been holding back. I don't know, Jack. A rifle and 5 gems for a towel. You might be underselling your value. Jack shook his head, exasperated. I'm not selling anything. And if one more person offers me ancient treasure for laundry, I swear I'm going to lose it. Towel diplomacy. By midday, Jack's presence had reached the station's higher-ups. As he sat at a small cafe on the observation deck, nursing a cup of steaming Kalteri tea, a shadow fell across his table. Jack looked up to see a tall, regal figure standing before him. Commander Varric, the head of Nexus 9 Security. His navy blue uniform was pressed to perfection, and the medals on his chest gleamed under the station's artificial light. Mind if I join you, Mr. Jack? Varric asked, his tone polite but firm. Jack gestured to the empty seat. Sure. What can I do for you, Commander? Varric sat down, his eyes flicking to the towel draped casually over Jack's shoulder. There have been reports. Jack sighed. Let me guess. About this. He lifted the towel slightly. Varric nodded. Station security has flagged at least 3 attempted trades involving high-value goods in your towel. Jack leaned back, groaning. I didn't ask for this. I'm aware, Varric replied. But it's creating quite the stir. The rumors say that this simple cloth represents human resilience. Some believe it carries luck. Others. He paused. Well, others think possessing it will make them better leaders. Jack arched an eyebrow. That's a lot of faith in bafflings. Varric allowed a rare smile. Indeed. So, what do you suggest I do? Jack asked. Varric considered the question. Perhaps you should lean into it. Jack nearly spit out his tea. Excuse me. Varric gestured subtly around the cafe. You've unintentionally created a symbol. Symbols are powerful in places like this. A station full of different species and beliefs. Perhaps this towel of resilience can serve as a unifying story. Something lighthearted. A connection between cultures. Jack chuckled, shaking his head. So you want me to keep playing along? Varric smiled. For now. Besides, it's not every day someone builds diplomacy out of laundry. Jack took another sip of his tea, gazing out at the stars. Yeah, he mused. I guess there are worse legacies to leave behind. A growing legend. Jack didn't plan to start a movement. He certainly didn't expect to inspire fashion trends across the Nexus 9 space station. Yet here he was, standing in the middle of the market sector, watching as alien merchants unveiled hand-woven towels in a variety of bright, ridiculous colors. Some had strange alien runes stitched into the corners. Others bore Jack's name in bold, glittering letters. The Human's Towel. A large banner hung over one of the stalls, showcasing what could only be described as towel-inspired capes modeled by several alien children. One kid spun dramatically, the towel billowing behind him as if he were preparing for battle. Jack stared in disbelief. Oh, my God. Zari, who had been enjoying the spectacle from the sidelines, stepped forward with a smug smile. I told you. It's not just a towel anymore. Jack slowly turned to him. I left my quarters for 2 hours, and suddenly I have an entire merchandise line. Zari chuckled, tilting his head toward one of the vendors. Apparently, the idea spread faster than we anticipated. The captain of a cargo freighter even bought one. Said it was inspirational. Jack pinched the bridge of his nose. Inspirational. It's for drying off. Perhaps to you, Zori replied. But to others, it represents something more. A symbol of resilience, strength, vulnerability. He grinned. Also, they're very absorbent. Jack shook his head in disbelief. I feel like I should get royalties for this. Before Zari could respond, one of the merchants approached, a short, furry alien with bright yellow eyes and a toothy grin. She clutched a bundle of towels in her arms, holding them out eagerly. Mr. Jack. She chirped excitedly. It's an honor to meet you. I was hoping you could bless these. Jack froze. Bless. I'm not exactly a holy figure, lady. She waved him off. Of course not. But a simple touch is all I ask. Just to infuse them with, your essence. Jack's eyes darted to Zari, who clearly found the entire situation hilarious. Sure, Jack sighed, reaching out reluctantly. He placed his palm flat on the topmost towel and patted it twice. There. Consider it blessed. The merchant practically squealed with joy. Thank you. Thank you so much. She scurried back to her stall, proudly placing a sign next to the stack. Officially blessed by the towel bearer. Limited stock. Jack groaned. This is spiraling out of control. Zeri crossed his arms, amusement flickering in his glowing eyes. You may not like it, but you are fostering unity, even if it's unconventional. Jack gestured around at the bustling market. Unity. I see a towel-based economy. The crew joins in. When Jack returned to the Varexes, things only got weirder. The moment he stepped into the common room, he was met by at least 10 crew members, each draped in towels of varying sizes and colors. Hero stood front and center, wearing a crimson towel over his shoulder like a sash. Zeri leaned casually against the wall, a sleek black towel tied around his waist like a belt. Jack stopped dead in his tracks. No. Kuro smiled. Captain's orders. A show of solidarity. Jack groaned loudly, rubbing his face. Why? Zeri straightened, walking toward Jack. The captain thought it would boost morale. You've inadvertently created a symbol that crosses cultural lines. By embracing the Towel Initiative, the crew feels more united. Jack stared at them, dumbfounded. You're telling me? The crew feels closer because we're all wearing towels. Caro grinned. It's surprisingly comfortable. Before Jack could argue, the doors to the common room slid open, and Captain Ralveris stepped inside, wearing a dark navy towel draped over one shoulder. Jack pointed. Oh, come on. Ralveris raised an eyebrow. Problem, Mr. Jack. Jack threw his hands in the air. You're the captain. You're supposed to stop things like this. Ralveris smirked faintly. On the contrary, if it promotes unity, who am I to object? Jack stared at him in disbelief. I need to lie down. The towel diplomacy mission. The towel trend didn't stay confined to the Varexes. A few days later, while docked at Nexus 9, Jack was summoned by the station's ambassador, a tall, elegant figure named Vera Loon. She greeted Jack warmly in her office, her long robes flowing as she gestured for him to sit. Jack eyed the towel draped across her chair. I'm guessing you've heard the rumors, he said dryly. Vera smiled. It's hard not to. Word has traveled far. The human towel-bearer has become somewhat of a folk hero. Jack leaned back in his chair. All I did was drop it. Sometimes, the smallest actions carry the greatest weight. Vera replied thoughtfully. Cultures are often shaped by symbols, unexpected ones. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. So, what exactly do you need from me? Vera's expression softened. There's a diplomatic summit happening tomorrow. Representatives from several outer systems will be attending. Tensions between the Vorathi and Drenox delegates have been high. They refuse to meet face-to-face. Jack frowned. What does that have to do with me? She clasped her hands together. We'd like you to attend. As a neutral figure, a symbol of peace, resilience, and humility. Jack blinked. I'm not a diplomat. No, Vera agreed. But you're someone they've all heard about. Someone whose story transcends species. Your presence could ease the tension. Jack exhaled slowly, glancing at the towel still hanging from his belt. I can't believe this is happening, he muttered. Vera smiled. Neither can I. Closing the gap. The Nexus 9 diplomatic summit was nothing like Jack had imagined. He had expected grand halls, formal speeches, and serious debates. Instead, he found himself seated in a wide, circular chamber filled with alien delegates, each dressed in their most elaborate ceremonial attire. The Vorathi representatives wore gleaming metallic robes, while the Drenox diplomats arrived in thick, spiked armor that clicked softly whenever they moved. And Jack wore his standard engineering uniform, with the infamous towel draped casually over his shoulder. The room buzzed with quiet tension. The Vorathi and Drenox factions hadn't spoken directly in years. Both species had been locked in trade disputes that nearly escalated to full conflict. The station's ambassador, Vera Loon, had barely convinced them to meet face-to-face. Now they sat stiffly across from one another, their expressions unreadable. Jack could feel the weight of their stares. He leaned slightly toward Vera, whispering, So, what exactly is the plan here? Am I supposed to wave the towel around until everyone feels better? Vera's lips twitched with the faintest trace of amusement. Not exactly. Your role is symbolic. The Varex's crew respects you, And by extension, so do many others. Your presence is meant to serve as a reminder of perspective. Jack arched an eyebrow. I think they see me as more of a joke than a symbol of peace. Vira's gaze shifted to the Dranox ambassador, whose piercing red eyes flicked down toward Jack's towel more than once. Sometimes humor is the bridge that words cannot build. Jack sighed. Great. I'm galactic comic relief. The Towel Incident, Part 2. The negotiations began stiffly. Each delegate took turns presenting their grievances, their words precise and cold. Jack tried to follow along, but the legal jargon and endless technicalities made his head spin. To make matters worse, the tension in the room seemed to thicken with each passing minute. Then it happened. As Jack leaned back in his chair, his towel, perched precariously over his shoulder, slipped. It fluttered silently to the floor. For a moment, no one spoke. Jack froze, staring down at the towel like it was an unexploded bomb. He could feel the heat of every pair of eyes in the room fixating on it. The Dranox ambassador's gaze narrowed, his spiked gauntlet resting on the table's edge. Across from him, the Vorathi diplomat sat forward, lips pressed into a thin line. Jack swallowed. Not this again. Slowly, he bent down and retrieved the towel, dusting it off as casually as possible. Sorry about that, he muttered, draping it back over his shoulder. To Jack's surprise, the Vorathi diplomat let out a soft chuckle. Jack glanced up. Something funny. The diplomat shrugged, gesturing toward the Dranox ambassador. I find it amusing. The human carries himself without fear, even among enemies. The Dranox ambassador's eyes gleamed, but instead of responding with hostility, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Humans are strange creatures. They hold no shame in small missteps. Jack raised an eyebrow. Dropping a towel is hardly an act of bravery. The Dranox ambassador's lips twitched. And yet, here you are, unbothered. The room fell silent for a moment, but something shifted. Jack could feel it, like a crack forming in the wall that separated the two factions. The Vorathi diplomat smiled faintly. Perhaps that is the lesson we overlook. Not every error is a sign of weakness. Jack blinked, unsure if they were still talking about him or something far deeper. Either way, he wasn't about to argue if it meant lowering the temperature in the room. I guess towels are pretty powerful after all, Jack said with a smirk. To his surprise, the Dranox ambassador chuckled softly. Perhaps. An unlikely agreement. By the end of the summit, no formal treaties had been signed. There were no grand declarations of peace or monumental policy shifts. But something important had changed. The Dranox and Vorathi factions left the chamber nodding politely to one another, their rigid postures noticeably softened. Jack watched as the once silent representatives began quietly discussing trade routes and supply lines. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the delegates filtered out, Vera approached Jack with a satisfied expression. You did well, she said, clasping her hands behind her back. Jack snorted. All I did was drop a towel. Again. Exactly, Vera replied with a knowing smile. Sometimes simplicity breaks down the most stubborn walls. You reminded them of that. Jack glanced down at the towel hanging over his shoulder, shaking his head. I can't believe this thing's going to end up in some galactic history book. Vera chuckled. History is full of strange beginnings. The farewell gift. Later that evening, as Jack prepared to return to the Verexis, he found Karo and Zeri waiting for him by the docking bay. Karo was holding something carefully wrapped in cloth. Jack narrowed his eyes. If that's another rare crystal, I'm not accepting it. Karo smiled and shook his head. No crystals. Just this. He unwrapped the cloth, revealing a neatly folded new towel. Jack stared at it. You're giving me a towel. Zeri grinned. Not just any towel. Handwoven by the artisans of Nexus 9. A gift of appreciation. Jack took the towel, running his fingers along the smooth fabric. It was thicker than his old one, with intricate embroidery stitched along the edges. The Veronese symbol for unity was sewn delicately into the corner. Jack's chest tightened. "I don't know what to say." Caro placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Consider it a token of the bonds you've helped forge." Jack smiled softly. "Thanks, guys, but I'm not dropping this one." Zeri smirked. "Are you sure? It worked pretty well last time." Jack laughed. "Fair point. But I think I've started enough towel-related movements for one lifetime." As Jack boarded the Verexis, towel in hand, he glanced back at the bustling station behind him. The universe was vast, strange, and full of mysteries, but somehow Jack had managed to leave his mark, one towel at a time.